I flexed my arms, muscles rippling under my sun-kissed skin as I hammered the final stake into the ground. The tent stood proudly in the middle of the vast Arizona desert, surrounded by a sea of golden sand and rugged red rock formations. I wiped the sweat from my brow, my pixie-cut hair sticking to my forehead as I do so. "Perfect," I said, stepping back to admire my work. Maggie smiled at me, her eyes red from recent tears but shining with a hint of relief. Maggie worked at an outdoor camping store, and this trip was her idea, the way to escape the suffocating stress of the city and the fresh wound of her breakup. We'd driven for hours, leaving behind the buzz of Phoenix for the quiet, eerie beauty of the desert. "Thanks, Jess. I really needed this," Maggie said, her voice tinged with gratitude. "Anytime, Mags. I'm always here for you." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, squeezing gently. We both stared out at the horizon, where the setting sun painted the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped, and we settled by the campfire, its flames casting flickering shadows on our faces. The crackling of the fire was the only sound, a comforting rhythm that seemed to synchronize with our breathing. "Do you ever feel like the city's just too much?" Maggie asked, poking at the fire with a stick. "Like no matter how hard you try, you can't find peace there?" I nodded, my eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "Yeah, I get that. That's why I left. Helps me focus, block out all the noise." Maggie smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I thought Jake was my peace. Turns out he was just another layer of noise." There was a long pause, the weight of Maggie's words settling between us. I reached out, taking her hand. "You'll find your peace, Max. Maybe not in a person, but it's out there. Just have to keep looking." We'd been friends for years, ever since childhood. We're like sisters. Sisters who went two wildly different directions in their lives, but still stayed together. We sat in companionable silence, the fire's warmth warding off the chill of the desert night. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, we shared stories, memories, and laughter, each word and smile a balm to Maggie's wounded heart. Hours later, as the fire died down to glowing embers, we decided to call it a night. The desert was eerily quiet, the stillness almost unnatural. We crawled into the tent, zipping it up tight against the cold and the unknown. "Good night, Mags." "Good night, Jess." I woke with a start in the middle of the night, my senses on high alert. I lay still, listening. The desert was silent, but there was an undercurrent of unease in the air, a feeling that something was watching. "Max," I whispered, nudging her. "Do you hear that?" Maggie stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Hear what?" I strained my ears, but there wasn't anything there, just the quiet rustle of wind against the tent. Never mind. Probably just my imagination. We settled back down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was awoken by something. So I lay there, staring at the tent ceiling, until exhaustion finally pulled me under again. The next morning, the sun rose bright and unforgiving, baking the desert sand and us along with it. We emerged from the tent, stretching and yawning. Maggie went to start the fire while I checked our supplies. "Jess, come look at this," Maggie called, her voice tight with worry. I jogged over. Maggie pointed to the sand around our campsite. There, in the soft earth, were footprints. Large, like a man's, but with an odd, twisted shape to them, like he was deformed. They circled the tent, leading off into the desert. "Did you hear anything last night?" Maggie asked, her voice trembling. "No," I lied, feeling a chill creep up my spine. "Probably some animal. Don't worry about it." Needless to say, Maggie didn't look convinced at all, but she nodded, trying to believe it. We went about our day, but the eerie feeling lingered, growing stronger as the sun climbed higher in the sky. And despite the unease of the previous night, we decided to push on. Heading home this early felt like giving it to fear. It didn't make any sense, and Maggie seemed to need the distraction anyway. We packed up our gear and set off on a hike, determined to enjoy the day and the beauty of the desert. The sun was high, its rays beaming down on us as we navigated the rugged terrain. The landscape was stunning. A tapestry of red rock formations, sprawling cacti, and endless blue sky. As the hours passed, we found ourselves lost in conversation, the strange event of last night gradually fading into the background. "Remember the time we got lost in the Grand Canyon?" Maggie laughed, her mood considerably higher. "How could I forget? We ended up in that tiny diner and the waitress told us about her alien abduction theories." I chuckled, shaking my head at the memory. Maggie grinned. "Those pies were pretty good, though." We hiked for several hours. We saw a few lizards, snakes, and even a coyote that kept its distance. It was nice, the exertion a welcome distraction from our worries. We stopped to rest in the shade of a large rock formation, sipping water and munching on trail mix. For a while, everything seemed normal, peaceful even. "Hi, Jess. What's up? See that boulder over there that looks kind of person-shaped?" "Yeah." "Bet you can't lift it." "Oh, really? Okay," I said, getting to my feet, stretching myself. "It's been a few days, but I think I can use the workout." "Girl, we just walked for hours. Surely that counts." The amount of times I've heard people say that. "It's not the same as lifting. Works different muscles." She just rolled her eyes as I walked over to the sizable rock. I squatted down, getting my feet into formation. Got my legs, arms, and boobs into the correct positions as I gripped the large stone and pushed myself up, tensing my core as I moved mostly with my legs. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know if this has a name, but it's kind of like a deadlift." I could just see her gaze from the corner of my eye. I tried my best to turn my head to look at what she's seeing, but I needed to drop the stone. I let it clatter to the ground with a large pump of sand. As the desert dust settled, my stomach dropped. Hanging from the arms of a cactus were several strange effigies, crudely made from sticks and twine. They twisted slowly in the breeze, their humanoid shapes casting eerie shadows on the sand in front of me. "What the hell?" I muttered, stepping closer. The effigies were unsettling, with bits of cloth and bone tied to them, giving them a grotesque appearance. "Who would do this?" Maggie's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my own fear in check. "Probably just some pranksters. Let's keep moving." Though I said that, I couldn't help but feel a sickly sensation when I gazed upon those weird figures. So I tried to keep them out of sight. We quickened our pace, the atmosphere growing heavier with each step. The path seemed to stretch endlessly, the sun dipping lower in the sky. The sense of being watched returned, more intense than the first time. As we neared our campsite, the effigies became more numerous, hanging from every available cactus. Things were definitely getting strange. They seemed to be watching us, their eyeless faces following our movements. Maggie's hand found mine. We walked in a tense silence, our earlier camaraderie replaced by a growing dread. When we finally reached the campsite, it was dusk. The fire pit was undisturbed, but the feeling of unease lingered. We hurriedly set up the tent, neither of us mentioning the effigies or the strange footprints from the night before. After a quick, silent meal, we retreated into the tent, zipping it up tight. The desert was quiet, And although it took me a few days to fully notice, it was too quiet. There were no crickets or anything like that. And the darkness outside felt heavy. "You think we should leave tomorrow?" Maggie asked, her voice small in the confined space. "Yeah," I agreed, not wanting to admit how scared I was. "First thing in the morning." We lay there in the tent, the silence between us growing heavier by the minute. The feeling of being watched had stopped for now, but the tension lingered, settled over us like a shroud. I tried to turn my focus to the familiar sound of Maggie's breathing, but my mind kept drifting back to the effigies and the strange footprints in the sand. "Yes?" Maggie's voice broke the silence, trembling slightly. "Thank you for everything. You've always taken care of me, even when I'm a mess." I turned to face her, squeezing her hand gently. "You're my best friend, Max. I'll do anything for you." She shifted closer, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Before I could respond, she leaned in and kissed me. For a moment, I was too shocked to react, my mind reeling. Then I gently pushed her away, my heart aching in the hurt I saw in her eyes. "Maggie, I didn't know you felt that way," I said, struggling to find the right words. "But, Maggie, I like guys. I'm straight. Despite what my lifestyle might suggest, I do like guys. I love you, but like a sister." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked away, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Sorry, Jess," she choked, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to make things weird." "Maggie, wait," I started, but before I could finish, she scrambled out of the tent, tears streaming down her face. I hurried after her, tripping over the scattered gear in my haste. My foot caught on a rope, and I tumbled forward, my head striking a boulder with a sickening crack. Pain exploded in my skull, and the world went black. When I came to, the sun was already high in the sky, its rays glaring down on me. I'd be sunburnt for sure. I groaned, lifting my hand to my throbbing head. Memories of the night before flooded back, and panic surged through me. "Maggie!" I called, struggling to my feet. My voice echoed in the empty desert, swallowed by the vast expanse of sand, rock, and cactus. I stumbled through the campsite, searching for any sign of her. The tent was empty. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the horizon, hoping to catch some glimpse of her. There, in the distance, I saw footprints leading away from the campsite, heading deeper into the desert. Ignoring the pain in my head, I grabbed a water bottle and set off after her, my mind racing with worry. As I followed the tracks, the landscape around me grew more desolate, the sun beating down mercilessly. The effigies we had seen the day before loomed in the distance, their twisted forms casting long shadows. "Maggie!" I shouted again, my voice raw with desperation. I trudged through the scorching hot desert, each step heavier than the last, the relentless sun beaming down on me, but I refused to give in. The trail of footprints was fading, but I followed it with a single-minded determination. Finally, I spotted a figure in the distance, standing still as a statue. "Maggie!" I called, my voice cracking from the exhaustion, but relief as well. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. Maggie stood with her back to me, unnaturally still. My relief began to give way to concern. Something about the way she stood, rigid, almost too still, felt off. Maggie? I called again, my voice softer, laced with worry. She didn't respond, didn't move. I didn't even see her breathe. I reached out, my hand trembling, and gently placed it on her shoulder. Her skin felt cold, despite the oppressive heat. I slowly turned her around to face me, my heart pounding in my chest. Maggie was smiling, a wide, unsettling grin that stretched across her face. Her eyes locked onto mine, unblinking and eerily calm. Maggie, I whispered, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Are you okay? She didn't answer, just kept smiling, her eyes boring into mine. It was as if she was looking through me, into something beyond. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was just a form of shock. It's okay, Mags. Let's get you back to camp, I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and guiding her slowly back the way we'd come. Maggie moved with me, her steps mechanical, her smile never faltering. My mind raced with explanations. Shock, exhaustion, dehydration. Nothing felt right. We walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of the sand under our feet. The campsite came into view, the tent a small speck in the vast expanse of the desert. I kept glancing back at Maggie, hoping for some sign of normalcy, but her expression remained fixed, that unsettling smile never wavering. Here, drink some water, I said, handing her a bottle. She took it, but just stared at me. Her movements were slow and deliberate. She didn't drink it. She just held it, her eyes still locked onto mine. Maggie, please, I said, my voice breaking. Say something. But she remained silent, her smile unchanged. The eerie stillness of the desert seemed to close in around us, and I felt a chill creep up my spine, despite the well over 100-degree heat. As we made it back to camp, I sat down beside her, trying to ignore that something was wrong, and just trying to be there for my friend. Maggie, we're gonna go home, okay? Have you got the car keys? She just smiled at me. And again, no response. I rifled through her pockets, which she didn't seem to mind, but I didn't find them. Maggie, we need the keys. She just smiled again. We're gonna be okay. We'll figure this out. But she just kept smiling, her eyes never leaving mine. I sat with her for hours, just watching the sun go across the sky, caressing her hair and telling her everything would be okay. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the desert, I busied myself with trying to care for Maggie. Her unsettling smile and unblinking stare were unnerving, but I forced myself to push through the fear. Here, Maggie, you still need to drink something, I said, holding the water bottle to her lips. Her hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with a strength that startled me. I gasped as her grip tightened, her fingers like a vice. Normally I could lift Maggie with one arm, but now, despite all my strength and training, I couldn't budge her hand. She forced the bottle away, her eyes never leaving mine. Maggie, what are you doing? I said, shock and fear mingling in my voice. She finally let go after I tried tugging free a few times and failing miserably. I stumbled back, rubbing my wrist where her fingers had left angry red marks. For the rest of the evening, I kept my distance, my eyes constantly on Maggie as she sat motionless, that eerie smile never leaving her face. I focused on packing away everything but the tents, determined to be ready to leave at first light. As I worked, the sense of being watched grew stronger, but at least now I had a source of it, When darkness fell, I settled us both into the tent, exhaustion weighing heavily on me. Maggie lay beside me, her breathing slow and even. I watched her for a while, hoping for some sign of the friend I knew, but her expression remained unchanged, just tilted and watching me. Despite the unnerving situation, I drifted into a fitful sleep, the events of the past days swirling in my mind. Sometime in the night, I woke with a start, my heart racing. The tent was silent, and for a moment I thought Maggie had run off again. Panic surged through me as I scrambled through the tent door, my hand shaking. "Maggie!" I called, unzipping the tent with trembling fingers. The flap fell open, and my breath caught in my throat. There, right behind the tent door, was Maggie's face. Or what looked like her face. It was distorted, elongated, and impossibly grotesque. Her eyes were hollow, like a hole in the sand. It was dark. Her smile twisted into a monstrous grin that sent chills down my spine. Before I could react, the thing impersonating Maggie let out a horrifying roar, a sound that echoed through the desert like a banshee's wail. I scrambled backwards, my mind racing. The thing stepped closer, its movements jerky and unnatural. With this primal terror, a surge of adrenaline shot through me, and without a second thought, I tore through the tent, ripping the fabric as I scrambled out into the night. The creature's horrifying roar echoed behind me as I ran, my heart pounding in my chest. The desert was a blur, shadows and sand whipping past as I pushed myself to go faster than I'd ever been before. I could hear the thing pursuing me, its twisted limbs making unnatural sounds against the ground. But somehow, pure terror fueled my legs, and I managed to stay ahead of it. Before too long, the car came into view, a small beacon of hope in the vast dark desert. I reached it, my hand shaking as I grabbed the car door handle. The keys were dangling in the lock, glinting under the moonlight. I hesitated for the briefest of moments, confusion flashing through my mind. Why were the keys here? But the creature's guttural growl snapped me back to reality. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. My fingers fumbled with the keys, and the engine roared to life just as the creature reached the car. I floored the gas pedal, the tires kicking up sand as I sped away. As I drove, my breath came in ragged gasps. I couldn't shake the image of that grotesque, twisted face from my mind. My mind raced with questions, but one kept resurfacing. Why were the keys in the door? The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the desert road ahead. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that grotesque abomination running right behind me, still chasing. But the road behind was empty, the night silent except for the hum of the engine. Then, in a flash of memory, I saw it. Just before I had gotten into the car, in that brief second it took to grab the keys and jump inside, I had noticed something in the sand. Drag marks, leading away from the car and into the desert. They looked like they'd been made by fingers. Somewhere out in the shadows of the Arizona desert, the real Maggie is still missing.
monster's grip we're bound. Memories, they start to fade, seeing clearly who betrayed. Tried to find you, tried to fight, lost my friend to endless night. Now